Welcome to the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, your guide to understanding how to get out of the Wall Street rat race and start your own mailbox money lifestyle. Now, don't let these handsome Southern draws fool you. These financial minds are teaching our country to enhance savings, increase cash flow, and create passive income, all without the help of Wall Street. Are you ready to break through? Now here are your hosts, Russ Morgan and Joey Murray.
Welcome. This is the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Your host, Joey, the Italian Stallion Murray, and Russ, the Idea Guy Morgan. Russ, the question of the day. Should everybody be going to college, and how do we pay for it? I guess that's two questions.
Good. I was thinking it was two. The answer is yes. We have to figure out a way to pay for it. And the first question was no. Not everybody should go to college. And I went to college with most of the people that shouldn't have went to college.
We all know somebody, at least, that should not have been there.
Very, very much so. I think the biggest question we're going to answer during this podcast is how do we pay for it? What are the different methods? Are there better ways? But also one of the questions is, if I'm going to go to college, I need to know what I'm going to do ahead of time and make sure that college is a requirement for it.
Well,
right.
I have the perfect example. Okay.
Let's hear it.
I'm confident at least one of my beautiful daughters should go to college.
Okay. Wow.
So Adler, my 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Every time I ask her, what do you want to be when you grow up? Her answer, Santa Claus. Okay. Very exclusive in her thoughts. Like she wants to be one person, not one, type of job. She wants to be one person.
Okay. So let's break down Santa. If Santa is what I want to be when I grow up, do I need to go to college? Okay. Well, I can think of a couple of reasons why Santa, some different skill sets Santa might need to learn while he's in college. I mean, one of those has got to be HR management.
Well, sure. I mean, you're managing an army of elves, for crying out loud.
You got tons and tons of workforce labor management that you're dealing with there. Yeah, I think that's going to be manufacturing.
Yeah, absolutely. Management of a process.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how many little toy soldiers they're making every month?
It's in the billions. I don't even want to get my arms around it. How about just the psychology of dealing with kids and keeping them nice all year long?
Yeah, that's a lost cause with me. No chance. What about just the logistics? Logistics of getting to all those homes
in one night?
Yeah, and you have to weave in and out of all the different weather storms and patterns. So he's got to be a meteorologist.
He's got to be a meteorologist. He's got to understand the weather patterns, but also he's got to have some sort of aircraft management. I mean, he's got to be able to navigate. Think about, does he have
aerospace engineering?
Yeah, something.
And then geography. I mean, I wouldn't know if I was in Slovakia or Australia.
Well, think about, the languages that he may have to speak. I mean, whenever he's crossing different lines, does he have to speak to them and talk to them?
I mean, how long do you think this guy's going to college?
He's got to be going for a while. Here's a question I've always wondered. Is Santa a nonprofit or is he a for-profit business?
That's a good question. I don't know where he gets his revenue from, but I'm pretty certain Toys R Us got squeezed out by that joker. I mean, what else happened to Toys R Us?
I mean, he definitely needs to know, and Santa's definitely got to have some physical fitness. I mean, think about the amount of times he's having to get on and off that sleigh and up and down the chimney.
Yeah, I've never even tried to do it once, but I'm quite certain I couldn't do it.
Well, what's another thing? Santa probably has to be he probably has some skills as a veterinarian.
Well, yeah, I mean, Blitzen gets a nail off your roof. He's got to stop and take care of that joker. That's his ride, man.
You better be on top of your game. So yes, I think Adler, if you want to be Santa, there are lots of degrees. She's going to have multiple degrees in different areas. And I think, yes, Santa is a worthy profession to need to go to college for.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and start saving now since she's 4. Get ahead of the curve on that deal. But let's jump into the rest of our episode to talk about specifically how we're going to do that. Have you ever had the thought, I really am not saving enough for the future? And at the same time, you're sitting down to write an enormous check to the IRS every single year for $100,000, $250,000, $500,000 in taxes? Guess what? We just found the money that you should be saving, and it's been under your nose the entire time. Go to freetaxwebinar.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com and learn how the wealthy are paying less in taxes. You can implement these strategies so that the next check you write will be to your financial future and not to the IRS.
All right, Joey. So all kidding aside, it's important for us to know how we're going to pay for our kids' college. It is, there's this real feeling I have in our house as I look at the $150,000 plus student loan debt my wife incurred while going through undergrad and dental school, that I wonder, is that the right thing for my child?
Well, we all want our kids to be better off than we are, right? I mean, who doesn't grow up and say, man, I wish fill in the blank. I wish I would have known this when I was at their age, or I wish I would have started off with, fill in the blank, some other asset or some other thing that now we know is so valuable. And this is what we're talking about, right? This is what paying for college in a different way could absolutely help them be better off than we were.
Well, you just said in a different way. I don't think there's a lot of conversation out there on different ways. What we hear in the marketing world is what?
Oh, 529 plans.
529 plans.
That's the only way to pay for college.
That's the government structured entity that came out of the IRS tax code in the late 90s that basically said that you can build a plan mostly built off mutual funds, which are investment tools.
Yeah, we'll hit on that in a minute.
As a way for you to put money away for college. Then if you use it at that time for higher education, those rules have been adjusted. We can talk about that a little bit in a second too, that if you use it for your kid or someone in your family, then the money can come out without paying tax on the gain, if there is a gain.
Right.
That's a big if sometimes,
wisely.
Right? Depending on when you went in, right? So if you bought it in 2001 and you were getting out in 2007, you're in bad shape. Well, here's the thing is that if you did that, then you potentially get the money out for those expenses. You avoided the taxation on it. Maybe you got some returns, maybe you didn't. But there's some also downside, and we're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about the penalties that are associated. If you don't use it, then now you're going to pay tax on the gain. Now you're going to pay a 10% penalty on the gain.
So you're talking about if you use it for some other purpose.
If you use it for any other purpose. So One of the things I want to talk about is, are there other options? Are there better options? Why? I mean, kind of the compared to what?
Yeah.
Why do we want to handcuff ourselves, in essence, be swimming with a concrete block around our leg with all these rules and regulations based upon this government program? Like, why do you think that is the best strategy? Why? What's driving that, Joey?
It comes down to marketing, right? We all have this idea. We want to help our kids if we can possibly pay for college. And what the mutual funds company have done is they've just given it to us on a silver platter. Oh, well, you need to silo your money over here. If you want to pay for college, we've created something specifically for you. We've tailored it specifically for this purpose.
By the way, done a good job. Over $300 billion have been put in those plans.
Wow. Yeah, they know what they're doing. We've talked about the Wall Street mindset. They got a lot of dollars pumped into advertising and media to make sure we get that idea.
Think about the volatility in that, though. So let's go back to this. What are we trying to do for our kids when we're wanting to put money away from college? Are we trying to save or are we trying to invest?
Oh, save. We don't want to lose it.
But that's not what these plans are called.
That's right. Well, no, they are called 529 savings plans. But they're actually invested in mutual funds.
Yeah, if you go and look at the prospectus and everything, they talk about the investments, they talk about the risk of loss, but the marketing says they're savings plans when they're investment plans.
Which, if I put money in a savings account, I'm not anticipating ever losing that money. I may not ever gain anything in a savings account, but I'm not going to lose. But there's a real potential for loss in a market-based investment.
Well, and so I think there's an important thing is to call it the way it is. If you're okay with that loss or the potential for that loss, that's fine. But when we call it savings, it makes us feel like I'm saving money. And for those who are putting money on a regular basis, when the market's diving like it is right now in 2018, they may not actually see the loss because their contributions has exceeded the amount of volatility in the actual overall account.
Right.
And that's what happens a lot with 401ks, IRAs. This is an assumption that the account's constantly growing. I must be doing well. But when they really look at it, it's a lot driven by how much money they're putting in it.
Right.
Well, so if we're looking at this, we're saying, okay, what are some real challenges I'm going to face in a market-based account? Well, clearly volatility is going to be one. But what are some other, obstacles that stand in the way of this typical way of saving or investing for college?
Well, I think one of the things that's important to know is because it's limited to this one aspect of paying for college, we should be thinking, shouldn't we be thinking about our money that we're saving for a particular purpose, that if something down the road changes, we're not tied to or required to use those funds for that particular purpose.
So you're saying if Adler decides not to go the route of Santa Claus and she wants to be, anything else that maybe doesn't require a college degree to be good at, then you're not tied down to that account and the penalties that would associate with that?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, don't you want the freedom to have your money be useful for whatever purpose you deem necessary? I mean, I have a hard time telling what next year holds, let alone what 15 years from now holds.
Well, here's the thing I think about. You talk about just the one use of the money. I think about the one type of investment that the money has to be in. It's all market based.
Yeah.
I'm not taking this money and I'm not putting it into things that I maybe can control, because we talk a lot with our clients about the places that you can put money, right? And the places we are real big on is anything that you can invest in yourself, either your business, right? You're your best asset. Your business is your best investment. Well, it's hard for me to invest in my business through this instrument. There doesn't exist. Now, there are some self-directed options out there, and there's some obviously clearly limitations on what you can do with those, but investing in your business is not going to be one of those because it's going to be too closely tied. You're not going to be able to do it.
Well, and even if those things are possible, are they probable? I mean, do I want to jump through any additional hoops with my money unnecessarily?
Well, you're not going to, because we're just too busy.
Yeah, exactly. But let's also mention this. So let's look at 15 years from now. And I'm just using Adler as my example, right? But then look at the next 15 years in general going forward. Right now, if an opportunity comes along that I do know about and I do have access to the funds and I could use it for this purpose, but now it's in this 529. Like maybe it's a rental property. Maybe it's something in my business that would give me a huge return. And I know about it. I'm now, that money is cut off from me.
And that's a big issue there, because you and I see money as just one big pool of cash.
Absolutely.
Right? We don't, I don't get really big into this isolating pockets of money. Oh, this money's, stored for retirement. This money's stored for reserves. This money's stored for college.
Right.
We see it as one big pool, and we know that there's allocations that will ultimately go toward those things. But how can I use this money to grow as efficiently as possible? And I do see. I mean, we did a podcast on opportunities find cash.
Absolutely.
There's so many opportunities that find cash. Well, opportunities don't find monies that are locked up that can't be used.
That's right. And I think there's this internal kind of thought process that we're all thinking about. It's what if these are just common things that come up whenever you're talking about 529. So I'm just going to hit on those. What if my kids don't go to college? That's big. What if the market loses money? And there's also this big thing. Can I afford to pay for college and retirement? So just to your point about sectioning off money, why does it have to be two separate things?
Well, and I think that's the point that you're saying there. If we've got 15 years, and if you're listening to this podcast, you're taking steps and action toward creating financial independence, which is very simply defined, having assets that produce income that are greater than your monthly expenses.
Passively. Right.
as passively as you possibly can.
Right.
I mean, we know there's no pure passive income. Well, if we're doing that, there may be times, things that, curveballs that are thrown in our lifetime that we didn't anticipate. We started saving and putting money away for college, and 6 years in, our job changes, our health changes. Something affects us to the point where we're not going to be able to have active income as long as we were expecting, or to the level that we were expecting. And the money that we had been putting away for little Jimmy's college, it's going to have to help create the freedom fund for us not to have to work forever. Because I can assure you, Jimmy wants to not have to raise you and I for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And that's what happens if we run out of money, if we don't set that plan. Well, there's no pivot plan within the 529 without taking a huge hit. Well, who wants to take a big hit after they just took a potential big hit?
Right.
So I think there's an issue that we have to address, is not only when we put money into things that are only able to be used for one thing, we don't know the future. We don't have the ability, whether it's an opportunity or if it's a challenge in our life, to be able to pivot to a different strategy.
Well, and Russ, I think why this is such a near and dear topic to me is it's really kind of what drove me to work with you back in 2010. Is I was at that point in my career where I was making good money, and I started thinking, okay, at the time, of course, I only had 2 little girls, and they were like 4 and 2 at the time. And I'm sitting there thinking, how do I start saving for college? But we've already addressed all the issues of what I knew was possible through these 529 plans. And then you offer up this whole idea of infinite banking, and I'm like, wait a minute, that makes all the sense in the world, right? I can have access to this money the whole time. I'm not limited to what I spend it on. If I find a great opportunity, I can spend it on that, which, we've talked about this on previous shows, but I've been able to do private mortgages. I've been able to do car loans and other things that have come across my path because of the money I was setting aside for their college. That is powerful, man. And so I am excited to share an alternative to this because of my own personal experience, my own story.
Well, you mentioned the opportunities that came across, and those opportunities are definitely things that are finding your cash. Well, if we're looking at this, why do you think most people use a 529 plan? Let's just kind of cover some of the quote unquote pros of a 529 plan.
I think that they're lured into it because it has a specific purpose. People need a plan.
Okay.
Right? They want something that's simple, like, oh, I need to save for college. Bang, here's a place to do it. I think that's number one reason. Number two is they think it has some sort of a tax benefit on the gains, right? Who doesn't want a tax benefit?
Okay.
Besides that, I think they think there's the prospect of being able to turn $1 into more so that they can afford to pay college easier than if they just paid it out of cash flow.
All right, so let's address those. I think those are high on the list. There may be one or two others on the Family Feud that we could that we could uncover, but I think those are probably top 3 or 4 on the list. Well, what would make again, the systematic approach? We know how important it is to create habit in our life.
Yeah,
we know how important it is to have something that we can put money in on a regular basis. Well, you in 2010 started creating a habit by putting money into a life insurance policy.
That's right.
That you assigned, in my head, this money is going to be used for college and for
opportunities.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I want to think of, all right, well, you mentioned the tax benefits of it. Here's an interesting fact that as I was researching our topic today, I started looking back through the history of 529 plans. Did you know in 2015 in the State of the Union address, President Obama actually put a flyer out there that said, hey, I'm looking at taking the tax-free distributions away from the 529 plans that exist.
How could he do that, Russ?
Well, he wasn't able to do it because he met such great resistance. But I think that was just the cheek in the armor, right? That's that I'm going to bring it up now, and then over time, it's going to gain steam.
Well, I mean, really what that tells me, and I think is what you and we constantly talk about different issues as it relates to taxes. The tax train episode we did, why wealthier people pay less in taxes. There's so many different aspects. So I'm not going to beat a dead horse on that. But the one key phrase about qualified plans is the government created it, and by one write-in in the tax code from year to year or at any time, they can make all of those balances retroactive even. You could have been building this asset for 20, 30, 40 years, and at one stroke of the pen, they can make what they did say was tax-free now taxable, or required distributions. All these things can be done by one stroke of the pen.
Well, and people would say, well, Joey, is that really possible? And the answer is yes, right? So 529 is a subsection of the IRS code. So 529, just think, I mean, logically with me, there was a 528, there was a 527, so forth and so on. You just take, 401, right? All of these were subsections of the IRS codes. Those didn't exist in the past. So they had a rule, and then they came back and gave an exception to the rule, or they changed the previous rule. So 401k, 529 plan, we look at those as exceptions that actually benefited us, right?
Right.
But the same thing could be said for the way they write in a new rule that changes what the previous rule said. And what happens if it's not a benefit to us, but yet we are locked in to a plan where maybe, now the money is no longer tax-free.
Yeah. Again, the comment about what Obama said is just proof that it's possible and it's coming.
Well, here's an issue, I think, is that why do we have the government as the largest student loan debt lender? And it's because they are wanting people to go into college, right? That's their objective. Here's a stat that when we watched that Tax Train documentary that was really shocking to me, that over 51% of the student loan debt repayees to our government are in default.
That's troubling.
So when that's one of their largest assets on their book is the loans that they've lent out for student loans, and 51% of them are not paying it back, why do I believe there's a chance in the future that they will take the 529 plan and change it to be taxable? Is because what they've created in the monster of the student loan debt, how are they going to fix that problem? Well, they can't get these people to necessarily start paying them back because maybe they got bad jobs. And a lot of those people are going to say, man, we can't pay it. But they look over here and they say, I've got $317 billion. There's a reason they know that number, by the way. Okay, well, we can
track that.
we can solve some of this problem by let's just make the first 50% of withdrawals subject to taxation. Right? I mean, that's the way it starts.
Ease into it.
Yeah, maybe it's the first 15%.
Sure.
Maybe it's, any amount over, $1,500. You name it, they can create the rule for us to do that. And it's one of those things where I look at this and I say, okay, is that the plan that's best? Because one of the things I want to go back to is, what if we want to do something else? What if, here's the thing. I think about, the best education we can give our kids is not going to be in the hallways and in the seats of some college campus. The best education is going to happen when we're one-on-one teaching them how we're building and sustaining wealth, and how we're learning how to grow, how we're able to build businesses. They're sitting there watching us and observing us. Well, what if I could take money with my child and I could go buy a rental house with it, as an example?
Yeah.
What if I show them how I observed, the documents, how I connect with an accountant, how I connect with an attorney, how do I, negotiate the price? What are the measuring sticks that I'm looking for? What was the remodel like? What are going to be my maintenance costs? How am I going to manage this tenant landlord relationship? And then what is the net result going to be? I mean, think about all the lessons and learning that they could have through that. And let's just say, the property we buy spits out $300 a month of net rental income after all of those things that we're paying for. Well, that's $300 a month that goes toward, anything we want it to be. So when they go off to college, that's $300 a month that helps pay the grocery bill.
Okay,
That's
all right,
$300 a month.
you're getting ahead of us.
Huh.
And I kind of hear the possibility for a whole nother episode on possibly like what alternatives to college are there, right? So we probably need to do that.
Okay.
But for those of you that are listening to this and saying, okay, you guys just poo-pooed all over the 529 plan, you got to give us a better plan, okay? We're going to do that. And first, it comes with counting the cost, right? We've got to talk about the true cost of college and figuring out ways to come up with how much is that really going to be.
Well, and so you can go on and you can Google the college that you're looking at sending your kid to, and it'll give you the tuition cost, and it may even give you a rough estimate of the housing costs that exist. Most of those numbers you're looking at, you need to probably add 10 to 15% to, right? I mean, they haven't thought through a lot of the little basic things that we all know exist in that expense. We'll multiply that times the number of years. And when you start looking at that number, because that's the first thing, like before you go buy a house, you probably have a budget of what your house purchasing options are going to be. Before you go buy a car, you probably have a pretty good budget to say, I can afford this. I'm not certain many people do that, Joey. When they send their kid to college, they really look at how much is going to cost and put it on the table and have a conversation. Hey, Adler, I love Santa. This is a wonderful concept. It's going to cost you just when you go to college, by the way, not the opportunity cost on the money. The cost for you to learn how to do all of these logistics, management, psychology, veterinary, geography, all these things, right? It's going to be $225,000, right? That's what it's going to cost. Now let's compare that to things.
Hold on. I just had a moment when you said that. Bear with me. I'm
back.
back.
Wait till Joey picks himself
I'm
off
back.
the floor.
I'm back. Sorry.
But when you look at that, you start looking at those numbers, then that really probably puts things in perspective a little bit. We start saying, are there some options for us to reduce this cost?
Right. So thinking through possibly doing some classes, college classes in high school. If that student, your child, has the abilities, and this is the thing, I think this really helps us as parents dial into each individual child and their desires, their drive, the things that are going to either help them or hurt them in a college situation. Because at the end of the day, there are some kids that don't need to go to college. It's not going to be a wise investment.
Well, they may only be going because they assume that's what they're supposed to do.
Well, and I think as parents, we have the peer pressure that, of course, our kids should go to college.
Well, because if you're sitting at the baseball game and your kid's a junior in high school and your friend next to you says, "Oh, where's Sam going to be going to college at the end of next year?" and you're like, "I don't think we're going to do it." You're going to be the weird one in the group.
Exactly.
And I think that's what ends up happening more often than not is that we think, "Oh, our kid has to go to college." But again, I don't want to go down this road because you know that. I mean, I have very strong feelings on this, but I want to say our kid, we've sat down with our child and we've talked to them about what their ambitions are, which is really tough, by the way. 16, 17-year-olds trying to determine what they want to do. Well, what are some ways that they can do that, though?
What are some ways they can do what?
They can start trying to figure out what they want to do, or at least eliminating the things that they don't want to.
I think you're wise. You're talking about doing things one-on-one with them. Experiences about things that you're doing. Are they into some of those things? Are they doing internships with your friends that may be in a different totally industry that they can kind of learn from and experience? Oh, maybe I am interested in medicine. Maybe I am interested in accounting or whatever it might be.
What I've found is part-time jobs, and some of these may literally be like shadowing. They just go and do stuff for 2 or 3 days. They don't get paid. They just watch. If maybe more times than not, they're going to find out that's what I want to do, but it will eliminate things off their list.
Well, I mean, how many times have we talked to friends of ours and say, "Oh yeah, I went to college for XYZ, whatever it is, fill in the blank," and yet they get into
art history major.
Do what?
Art history major.
Yeah, they get on the first job and they learn everything that they need to know. they're like, wait a minute, it's on the job training, right? But we do that after college. Why don't we try to do that ahead of time? Like you're saying, giving them that on the job experience so that even see if this is even possible for them. It's something they're even
so some
remotely
definite
interested in.
easy ways to help reduce the expense of college is helping your child early on before they go determine what they want to do. Show them the price. Let's do the math. Let's actually figure out, okay, you want to be Santa. Let's go look up what the average Santa salary or income is out there.
Well, now the guys with the legit beard make a lot more than the guy with the fake beard. I'm going to go ahead and say that.
No doubt on that. And the one probably, ringing the bell out in front of the Walmart, I mean, depends on how honest a guy he is. I mean, he may make a little more than the next guy, right?
He makes a little tax-free income on that deal.
Well, but here's the thing is that you need to know what's that income going to be. I mean, just do some basic math. If you were going to go start a business, the bank's going to actually sit down with you and they're going to figure out your business plan. They're going to figure out how much it's going to cost, what's going to be the possibility of your income, and they're going to compare it to the expenses. Well, that's the reason, by the way, this is a reason why the government's the largest student loan lender, because banks wouldn't lend money to 99% of the people out there going to college.
Oh, good point.
They're not good investments.
Okay, so we've touched on this. Count the cost. That's step one. Before you even start doing this, count the cost. Number two, so some of you have 529 plans. Okay, someone has a 529 plan right now, Russ. They're like, okay, you've kind of poo-pooed on my deal. What can I do?
All right, so here's one thing that just recently happened with this new Trump Tax Act.
And we are not experts in this, by the way, disclaimer.
Yeah, no, we're not experts in this, but I read it on Google, right? I slept at a Holiday Inn Express last night, and I turned on the internet. But one of the things, because we were sitting next to a tax attorney, that's the only reason we even knew to look it up, because he was bringing this up in light of some other things we were talking about. But there has been some expansion to the 529 rules, where in the past, you could only use those dollars for higher education learning, right?
Right.
And it had to be like literally like tuition.
Yeah, very narrow.
Yeah, very narrow in its scope. Well, now, as we've learned, that scope has been widened. So if I have money in 529 plans, if I go, okay, I'm listening to you, I'm still waiting on your solution, but it sounds like, being tied down to this one investment option when I really want to be saving, tied down to only one specific place I can put my money and not maybe closer to things that I can control and I can impact the results. And the fact that, maybe this tax-free part is not always going to be tax-free by the time Adler gets to college 16 years from now. Maybe I should be thinking about some other options. What do I do, though, with the money I've already stuffed into this thing? My mom and dad have been putting money in this plan for me. Here's what you can do, is that the current plan states that we can actually use this money from K through 12. So if I have a private education that I'm sending my kid to a private school, I can use those dollars for that. Up
to how much?
Up to $10,000 per year right now.
Okay.
If they require my kid to have a computer, for instance, that's an example. So now you need to look at your own state's rules, because from what I read, it didn't seem like this was a federal mandate, but we know states independently look at this differently. So you need to look at that and see how that would affect your scenario. But that is definitely one option. If I have a 529 plan, obviously I can quit putting money into the thing. But secondly, I might be able to start getting money out of it to use it for private education. So I can start using those dollars.
Right. Okay. Perfect. So number one, count the cost. Number two, if you have a 529, look at ways to stop putting money in and possibly use it now instead of later. Number three, buy assets to pay for college. Okay. That's a little bit ambiguous. What do you mean?
Well, what are, Robert Kiyosaki defines an asset as anything that puts income into your pocket. Right? So what are assets, Joey, that you can buy that will put income into your pocket?
Well, he actually does an example in his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, about a guy using money he was setting aside for college to buy a rental property. So I think real estate definitely fits that mold of rental real estate. Creating passive income through rental real estate could definitely be a way you help pay for college.
Well, I mean, that was one of the first things. The first piece of real estate I bought actually was a condo at Auburn. And part of my thought process, again, I bought it terribly. I did not know all the things I know now about how to buy real estate, what to look for. But one of my thought processes behind buying it was that it was in a college town that I would like my kids to go to school at. One, because I like the school, think it's a good place, safe place. I know their sports teams are not always number one in the nation, but they're still good teams, right? I mean, we don't pay our kids as much as everybody else, so we don't perform at the highest of levels. But it's a school that I think that I would want them to go to. So my thought was, hey, I can be using this money to build revenue up until that point. And then, by the way, I could put one or two of them in the apartment, in the condo while they're there.
Yeah.
So then I'm taking care of kind of like two birds with one stone.
That's
if
right.
I put one there, I get a friend to come there. They pay rent for the other part, probably covers all the expenses.
That's right. So buying real estate is an alternative, or it's another way of doing this.
I think that's a great option.
And we've talked about life insurance, another asset type that will grow passively and allow it to actually turn into passive income down the road. And in fact, you could buy the life insurance that then you use the cash to purchase the real estate.
You could do both.
So that's like three. Is that three birds with one stone?
I don't know. But here's the thing, I guess, kind of going back to the compared to what we talked about, what were some of the top reasons why people would use a 529 plan. And one of them was the tax-free aspect of it. You and I know using life insurance as a tool, when we borrow against it, we don't have to pay tax on that money. So that's equivalent to our 529 plan. I mean, the same thing could be true with the real estate. If I borrow against the equity in the real estate for the same thing, I can get that money out without paying taxes. So there are benefits that compare very favorably to some of the things that I liked about, having a 529 plan, being in the tax-free aspect. But because those two things are private, right? The real estate that I buy and the life insurance companies, as long as we're using private companies, these are not government-run entities. These are things that we get to control.
That's right. And for some of you maybe thinking about, okay, well, maybe it's too late for me to start saving in life insurance, because there's a little bit of a startup to those. They're not every dollar's not available day one. Well, there are plans. In fact, we just recently set one in place for a couple that their son is in his senior year, and they're like, man, are we too late? And guess what? We actually have put a plan together, and we're actually going to do a case study that we're willing to share with you here on this show. You can go to college.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com to download that case study to see how we calculated how much they needed to be saving in life insurance in order to be prepared to pay for college. We'll cover the one that's the late bloomer. Hey, maybe I've waited too long. And the person that says, hey, I'm going to start when my kid's 1, 2, 3 years old for the same purpose, and look at a couple different aspects. So be sure to go to that.
Well, let me ask you, what would be the pros outside of some of the things you just touched on of the tax-free aspect of it? What would be some other pros to using the life insurance as opposed to using the 529 plan?
Well, I think at the end of the day, you're able to access the money, right, for any purpose. Just like I've mentioned, for me, being able to do things like these private mortgages and this car loan and other things that I've been able to do, having access is tremendous. Having a slow and steady wins the race, something that is going to consistently pay a return no matter what the market does. I'm not in that ballpark. And then also, we've talked about it, that these insurance policies predate the IRS. So the chances of the government coming in and trying to make a change to a life insurance policy is ridiculously low compared to them going in and making changes to something that they created and that they can change just in the tax code.
One of the things I liked about this when I was looking at this for myself was the fact that if I borrowed against these while they were going to college, and some of this real estate that I've bought, some of these businesses that I've invested in, when those pay off, right? When I decide to sell those businesses or sell that real estate, I have a place actually because of the loans I've taken for college, I have a place for those windfall dollars to come back.
Oh, no doubt.
And I love the uninterrupted compounding that we get, that uninterrupted growth, meaning our money has been growing at that slow and steady rate you were talking about throughout the whole time. And I have a place for those dollars to go that will serve my further purpose, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like, I use these dollars for college, but I didn't stop the growth. I mean, we all have heard opportunity cost, but most of us don't really apply it, meaning that I save up or invest this amount of money and then I spend it. Well, we know that money then quits earning. But if I use it from these life insurance policies the way we do it, then that money keeps growing. And if I do have these windfalls down the road, I get to take advantage of that maturity in that policy.
Well, and I love what you just said because it answers a question that I mentioned early on in this show, but it's something we're constantly thinking about. Can I do both? Can I help my kids pay for college and retire well? Well, if I've used, let's say it is $150,000 to send a kid to college, just one. Now, of course, multiply that times however many you and I have, and that's a big number. But just once, if you had the choice, would you or would you not want that $150,000 to have continued to grow towards your end goal to have that retirement passive income stream? Well, of course.
Well, here's a beautiful thing, and we did a case study on this. We did a case study that came from a book, The Path to Financial Peace of Mind, where the person started a policy on an 8-year-old, and they used it for different life events, going to college, buying a car, weddings, things like that. But at the end of the line, one of the things I loved about it is some of the teaching, because you may say, look, I want my kid, if they're going to go to college, I want them to actually pay for it, because I want them to learn the responsibility that comes along with that. Well, who's to say that we couldn't take a loan against the life insurance policy to pay for the actual student loan and make the child set up a monthly payment back to the family bank system, back to the insurance policy? So then that money is now back in the family's, coffers, is back there for the use of other dollars. And by the way, it's a windfall opportunity for the child in the future. If the life insurance policy was on the parent, there's going to be a death benefit associated.
That's right.
If it's like what you and I have done, we've created insurance policies on our children. It's policies they will inherit when we have now passed. So these are things that are events, this compounding of dollars. When you start thinking about what a dollar is going to multiply over 30, 40, 50, 60, 70-year period of time and longer, man, these things really start to create next generation. So we're thinking silo, hey, this is college, but there could be so many other uses of this.
Yeah, think much bigger, comprehensively about your dollars. Like we said, it's a big pool of money that should be working for you. So if you have questions about this, of course, we want you to call us. You can go on our website, sign up for a free call with one of us, and we're happy to do that, one of the people on our team. So if you have specific questions about this, make sure go to the show notes, go to our website, whatever it takes, get on our calendar. Because at the end of the day, we're about creating opportunities, not having to choose either or in college or retirement, right? We want to create passive income that never existed before out of these policies or out of the real estate that you may buy with it. And we want it to be more efficient, have peace of mind about the plan, that it's going to continue. And it's not just this one and done type of purpose.
Yeah. I think there's so much freedom in having options. And I think limiting ourselves under one idea. I mean, that's why I love what Nelson Nash created in the Becoming Your Own Banker book. He created a concept that was called infinite banking, emphasis on infinite. I want a plan with infinite options. Because who knows? I mean, I know I'm the idea guy, right? My brain is always thinking of ways to put things to work. And maybe right now your brain is telling you, well, I only know one thing. But that may not always be the case. If you're listening to this podcast, if you're watching videos, if you're listening to other podcasts or reading other books, your mind is constantly growing and learning. And as those ideas pop up, you would like to probably apply some of them. But if you've put yourself in a situation where you're isolated, you're siloed into one tool, then you're not going to be able to do that. And I love the fact that this gives us multiple options. Thank you so much for listening, as you always do. This is a concept that can apply, but you do need to have good guidance to start off. So go to freecall.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com. We'll be glad to get on a short conversation with you and talk about this or any other issues. And feel free to go to Wealth Without Wall Street to this episode so that you can get links to the case studies that we've mentioned.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.